Good morning and peace be upon you, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Qasim Rashid. This is the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We've got a phenomenal show. Liz Plank is here. Liz is a brilliant journalist, was named to the Forbes 30 Under 30, named by Media as one of the most influential people in news media, has been ranked as one of the most powerful women, most influential people in gender globally, runs an amazing Substack called Airplane Mode with Liz Plank. We'll talk to her in just a minute. This last week I turned 43, which 42 was cool because it was the meaning of life. You know, Hitchhiker fans know what I'm talking about. But 43 has been fantastic already. It's a weird feeling to be quickly approaching a half century mark, which is just kind of hitting me really hard right now. But I love it. I'm embracing it. And I've got 11 life lessons I'll share after we speak with Liz Plank. So we're going to go to break right now. And when we come back, we'll be speaking to Liz Plank, brilliant journalist and an influencer. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on Substack. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126. If you're listening on Substack or watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button so we can keep creating this content. I am extraordinarily excited about this week's guest. The amazing Liz Plank is here. She has been named one of Forbes 30 Under 30, Mediaite's most influential in news media, Marie Claire's most powerful women, and named one of the world's most influential people in gender policy. She runs an amazing Substack called Airplane Mode with Liz Plank, and we're here to talk about a lot of amazing things. Liz, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm such a big fan of you, your show, and so it's always a joy to get to talk to you.
The feeling is mutual, and I think I do remember the first time I became aware of you, and I've mentioned this to you offline, but I want to mention it on air,
Uh,
is when you interviewed Trudeau, which you can tell me how long ago that was, but I feel like I followed your career for a long time, so it's great to
aw,
have the ability to connect in person as well.
thank you. Yeah, that was an interview that was 9 years ago because that's how long Donald Trump has been in the game. It was in the lead up to the 2016 election, and during our interview, he got Americans begged him to run for president. That was one of the it was the Good Liars at the time. I didn't know who they were, but that was
Yeah.
the yeah. So that was the vibe, which now is very
Yeah.
different. Very different.
It's a different world. If you
Yeah.
ever like want to look into an alternate universe, look at like the 2000 presidential debates or even the 2004 presidential debates. And you're like, what
Yeah.
is even happening here? It's just a bunch of old white men arguing about who's better. And I'm like, how are any of you
Mhm.
in this country? It's a wild take to have in the first.
Yeah. And there was so much respect. I mean, very often I feel like this clip goes viral every, election cycle of John McCain, responding to a woman um, who, calls Barack Obama a Muslim or, not
Yeah.
American or whatever she says.
Yeah.
And he just stops her, and he says he's a good American. He's a good man. And yeah, when's the last, I mean, oh my gosh.
But like
Yes.
even that clip, it's like this is what we're grasping onto because
Yeah,
his statement is not that there's nothing wrong with being a Muslim or an Arab. His
that's
statement,
right.
he's not an Arab, he's a good man, like as if they're two mutually exclusive things.
Right.
And like we hang on to that. And I have my issues with Colin Powell, but he did, have an interview, I think on MSNBC, where he actually pointed that out and he goes, well, the correct answer is so what if he's Arab? So what if he's Muslim? Why can't an Arab American or a Muslim American kid be president one
Yeah.
day? But the real issue, and I mean, for what it's worth, McCain did give a half decent answer, so I don't want to speak ill of the dead. But you're right. That to me was like
Well, the bar's in hell. Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's wild. It's wild. We
Uh,
got a lot to cover today. I want to start with the first thing. I was talking with you off air about this. When I was just Googling you and just putting together my notes for the show, the first question, you know how Google gives you like a list of questions, and the
yeah.
first question was, "What is Liz Plank's real name?" And and so I think you need to come out of the closet and to kind of share the world what your real name is, Liz.
It's so funny. I'm not going to take us on a rabbit hole, a whole other tangent, but I did get threatened to be sued from. I'm making a documentary about people with disabilities by like Rudy Giuliani's fixer, like this like really awful lawyer who literally helps like rich people in the Upper West Side like sue homeless shelters from like establishing themselves in their neighborhoods. And I think they saw that question maybe because they tried to say that my name was Liz Piazzi. I think like somehow on my Wikipedia,
Really?
like someone put it as a joke. And
That's
so they were
hilarious.
like Liz Blank, like they put it in quotation marks and they were like, This is not even her real name." And I was like, "Where is this coming from?" Like,
That's
so
hilarious.
now we've solved it.
That's my
People
answer to
think
that.
it's fake, it's real.
It's
And
Elizabeth Blake, and that's my theory. It's such a cool, like, catchy name that everyone has to be
oh,
like, well,
it can't be real.
John Stewart is like John Lebowski or something like that, but he's got some like different name, and he picked Stewart. So
Oh,
she'd probably do the same thing because nobody has a cool name like that on its own, naturally
well,
speaking.
that's sweet. But you know what's funny though is that so when I started going on MSNBC, I think I did a poll for my like on Twitter or something, and I was like, because they asked me, "What do you want your Chiron to be?" And I was like, "Is it Elizabeth or is it Liz? Like, what should I go as?" Right? And
Yeah,
people were like, "Liz," and but now, and I don't know if you do this because I know you talk a lot about issues that are controversial, and so I'm sure you get a lot of really nice messages, but I'm sure you also get some less, nice
yeah,
messages, but I basically Liz Plank is kind of my alter ego. Like when I get a lot of, yeah, just hate or people are
yeah.
really mad at me or people try and sue me, I'm like, "Oh, they hate Liz Plank." Like I'm Elizabeth Plank. So I do have a little bit of a distance, from it, and
Good.
I highly recommend it for anyone who's doing any kind of thing in the public,
That's
to
good.
just, you yeah,
My nickname ever since high school, and I was in high school in the 1990s, was Q.
yeah.
And
Cool.
it stuck forever until QAnon became a thing, and then suddenly,
Right.
no, you can call me Qasim now. It's fine. Like I don't need to be associated with because people started thinking I was associated with QAnon because they're like, oh, like you really are into this thing. I'm like, no, I swear to God, I'm not. I
That
was Q way
sucks.
before QAnon. So it's
They
just funny.
should have known.
I know, I know. But
I'm sorry.
there's such a tokenization of black and
Yeah.
brown people in this whole right wing kind of sphere of stupidity and fascism. Um,
Mhm.
if a South Asian like me suddenly became a right wing MAGA, I would make a killing. I would make
So
an
much money.
killing.
So
Like
much
it would be
money.
the
Yep.
grift of a century. But I have these things called morals and ethics and a conscience, so I can't do that,
It's
unfortunately.
so annoying, right?
It gets in the way every single time. Every single time. We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've been talking about, I want to get to the Epstein files in a minute, but one of the things that you've really elevated that I've been fascinated by this conversation, and we talked about it last week on a Substack Live, and it's been kind of running through my mind, is this phenomenon of the so-called male loneliness crisis. And I call this so-called because I think it's made up, to be honest. And maybe that
Mhm.
sounds cruel, and maybe somebody listening will be offended by that. And I don't mean to offend you, but I feel like it's just a lack of men taking accountability and just pretending to be victims when they could just not be victims, right? Like I don't see it as like a real issue, but maybe I'm being callous and cruel. I'd love for you to kind of share your thoughts on this because you've spoken about this at length, and it's
Mm.
fascinating to me. So please share with our audience.
Well, it's interesting because Barack, I don't know if you saw Barack Obama went on a podcast and sort of discussed, I don't know if he went really into the loneliness crisis per se, but he talked about young boys and how progressives need to be better in the way that we talk about boys and men. So yeah, curious if you got to see that. But
I did see that. Yeah, I did see the clip on there. Yeah.
yeah, and to me, there's like, yes, I literally wrote a book that was, like, saying that, 5 years ago, and it was very, um, l I think one of the biggest, like, spiritual awakenings of my life actually was writing, my book and doing research on how helpful feminism and
Yeah.
eroding patriarchy is for men's well-being, for their mental health, for
Yeah.
everything from and there's all kinds of studies that I outline in the book, but the data is very clear that
Yeah.
if there was a magic pill, right, something that lowered men's rate of likelihood of divorce, likelihood of violent death, likelihood of dying of cancer, likelihood of drowning, likelihood of all of these bad outcomes, every man would take it. And that pill is called feminism. It really is. But I think that sounds very counterintuitive to people. But coming back to my spiritual awakening, I felt a little betrayed that I had done, a graduate program in gender and social policy. I devoted my, really like my life to studying these things, and I felt that that hadn't been highlighted.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important. Yeah, I think that part. When that part is missing from when we talk about men and boys, when we're like, and by the way, the system that's hurting them is the same system that's hurting women. I think
Yeah.
I didn't hear Barack Obama make that point, and maybe I need to go back to it, but and listen to it more thoughtfully. But that part is what's missing in the loneliness crisis conversation too. I think that very often when we talk about whether it's the male loneliness crisis or so many men are committing suicide, so many men are dying by guns, are involved in gun violence, and so but very often it's not. We're like, oh, there's this thing happening, and there's no system that we're sort of pointing to that is
Yeah.
causing these things from happening. And again,
Sure.
that system is called patriarchy, and patriarchy hurts women. That's very obvious, I'm sure, to your audience, and I know to you. But patriarchy also really really hurts men and limits men. And actually they are, bell hooks says that they're the first victims of patriarchy very often. I mean, that's why I'm so spend so much time trying to change and heal men, because I want them to stop hurting me, right? I want them to stop
Yeah.
hurting women and girls around me.
Yeah.
And so if we can sort of, yeah, I think the male loneliness crisis in in many respects. I mean, we're all lonely, right? Right. If you look at rates of, especially with young people and dating and sex, yeah, women aren't having sex with each other. You know what I mean? Like they're not having sex. If men aren't having sex, women aren't having sex
Yeah.
either. If men aren't going on dates, women aren't going on dates either. There's really a lot more loneliness for everybody. But women tend to really nurture their friendships, really tend to give back to their communities. They're more likely to volunteer, they're more likely to get involved. And so female loneliness is a lot less sort of lethal, honestly,
Yeah.
and a lot less sort of severe, and pernicious as male loneliness. And so that's why it gets a lot more attention. And I'll add one more layer, which is
Yeah.
often we actually celebrate loneliness in women, right? We celebrate single women. We say, go girl, get that house, freeze those eggs, right? And we don't sort of have that same kind of compassion of, well, don't you want to get married, right? Don't you want to share your life with a partner? And some women don't. I'm not saying we have to, but I think we have to acknowledge that the way that we approach that conversation is just really gendered.
It is. And I think that's a really important point. Women don't tend to resort to violence when they're lonely,
Yeah,
and men fortunately do. You see the majority of mass shooters, I think all but maybe one or two are men.
literally.
The majority of people who die in gender-based violence are women at the hands of men. Even the terminology we use, right? Violence against women, like there's this magical violence that's just falling upon
Yes.
from the heavens. It's not,
Yeah,
no, it's called to men, like call it, male
what it
violence
is.
women, and so even the terminology has to be important. Do you see a cycle of this, kind of like a vicious cycle with the dehumanization of women through things like the proliferation of pornography, which, like
Hmm.
psychologists show, changes the brain structure of men? And in teens that have been interviewed and polled and surveyed in focus groups, they demonstrably view women as lesser than, and then they become incapable of treating women normally or as an equal and become abusive, which tells women that I need to stay away, which makes men feel lonely, which forces them
Yeah.
back into, abusive pornographic addictions. And it's like, do you see a vicious cycle? And if so, well, if so or if not, but how do we break that cycle? Because I don't see how that's healthy for anyone.
Yeah, yeah, I think porn is actually one of the rare bipartisan kind of issues. I talked to you about how I went to the Turning Point USA conference and spoke
Yeah.
to a lot of sort of Gen Z Republicans there, and I've talked about porn to men before I was on the campaign trail and sort of going to swing states and talking to men too about Project 2025, which was very clear about wanting to literally ban porn entirely, make it a federal crime, put only fan creators in jail, right? Like it's a pretty extreme sort of take on porn, and that's not a liberal one, right? It's the
Yeah. I
conservative
mean,
one.
that wouldn't actually solve anything for those advocating for that. Like, and that's kind of my point. Like, you
Yeah.
can't force morality. So I don't think that's the
Yes.
solution either.
Yes, I think that's a really great point, and I think the left or progressives tend to also not necessarily be like big advocates for porn and want to or are concerned with its proliferation, but for a different set of reasons. And those are the reasons that you outline of. Yeah, all of the data, you can look it up. I mean, there's some interesting research too about there's a really good book called Boy Mom from Ruth Whipman. She'd be great for your show.
Yeah.
She basically talks about research that shows that yes, porn affects men's brains, but they see the same effect with men who watch reality show TV, right?
Wow.
So any kind of and it's sort of a commentary about how I don't know if you watch Love Island. You don't because clearly.
You can tell. I'm not that guy, but yeah. Go on.
But it's highly sexualized, right? it's
Yeah.
it's so the porn, let's say you do, yeah, get rid of porn and you put all these OnlyFans creators in jail, you still have a pornified society.
Right.
There's so many ways that it shows up. If you watch, I was watching this burger commercial, Carl's Jr. whatever, with Alex Earl, and it's like it's all about, it's not a burger commercial, let's just put it that way.
Right.
It's a commercial that really has, I mean, subliminal is not even the way to approach it. It's very, very sexual.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a fascinating conversation. I don't think we should just outright ban it. I think we've talked about Mike Johnson, having like an accountability app with his son so
Creepy.
that they don't watch
Really
porn and they don't
creepy.
masturbate. I don't think that's the
Yeah.
way to do it. But I do think that for a lot of men that are not crazy, right wing, and not crazy, just middle of the road, ordinary guys, it is something that they struggle with, and they do, it does cut them off from real relationships
Yep.
and makes real relationships more difficult, makes sex more difficult. And I think it is, to me, that is way more important and is such an important it's such a big part of the loneliness crisis. And if we were to address that specifically, to your point, I
Sure.
think we would get a lot further, because it's, yeah, let's be honest, a lot of men are just opting out of dating entirely and watching porn instead.
Yeah.
That is just happening on like a mass scale.
Yeah. The,
And so yeah.
the data proves that, and it's more prevalent in the conservative states. All the data proves
Yeah.
that it's the majority, and so it's that's why I mean it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're just tuning in, we're speaking with the brilliant Liz Plank, author, journalist, influencer. Follow her on Substack, Liz Airplane Mode with Liz Plank. One of the things that you said earlier that I want to double down on is this idea of feminism. And I think this is where men like me and other men in general need to be more accountable to demonstrate that feminism is not a weakness. It's actually very manly. It's actually
Mm,
masculine. It's actually a strength and strengthens not just men, but then ultimately strengthens families and societies as well. And not to
yeah.
bring religion into it, but I'm reminded of this really famous story from the life of Prophet Muhammad, where he
Yeah.
is he had two grandsons, and there's this moment where he's playing with them and he's kissing them and he's hugging them and just cuddling with them, something that we would consider like not real manly or nothing that
Yeah.
manly things do. And somebody mocks him and says that I have 11 sons and I've never kissed any of them. And he responds and says, "How can I give you compassion when you've banned it from your own heart?" And it's this point of like, this is not weakness. This is strength. This is, we show
Hmm.
compassion to young boys and to young children in a sincere way, as a father or grandfather should. You strengthen them and you strengthen society, and you let them know that this kind of affection is a good thing. It's a natural thing, and it softens their heart
Yeah.
as well. And so I think where men like me need to be more accountable is how do we better, and this is where this is the question, how do we become better ambassadors for feminism and advance the factually and demonstrably correct narrative that being a feminist is not a sign of weakness, it's actually a sign of strength.
Yeah, I love that question. And I think it taps into something that when we're talking about the things that are missing from some of these conversations with men and boys, to me, that part is missing. It not only is the cause sort of this amorphous force, but the solution is this amorphous force, when in fact the solution lies in men. Because again, I can go and write another book like this. Women bought this book, men
Yeah,
eventually bought it, women bought it for their boyfriends, and then their boyfriends read it and
right.
they told their friends to buy it. But
Yeah,
ultimately, and in the same way, by the way, with feminism, right? Like, I came to my feminist awakenings, to my, to my own healing from patriarchy and all of those systems, because of other women, right? Who
yeah,
taught me, who held me, who mentored me, um who really had, were in relationship with me, and who I learned so much from. And so I think that part is so crucial, that, the question that you asked, which is what can men do. Men can do so much more, in fact, than women, in terms of this, whatever, if you want to call it the male loneliness crisis, or the, proliferation of porn, or the proliferation of sort of violence, because there, I've yet to meet a man who is violent towards women who hasn't been violent towards himself, right? Like, there's just no, that's always
yeah.
that's always the case. And by being violent towards, a woman that you love, like, you're being violent towards yourself. I mean, there's just no denying that. And so, there's some really interesting programs that I think, are come across as radical, but to me are but not at all. There's a hotline in Colombia that was starting, like, about a year ago, for violent men, because we know that there's hotlines for women who are battered, and who are abused. But what about a hotline for men who are, committing that violence, right? Because the hotline for women is great. We're sort of, it's not a band-aid, but we're sort of tending to that
But
wound.
it's also reactive though. But that's also reactive, right? So you're talking about a proactive
Exactly.
hotline.
Exactly. And sort of acknowledging that these men need help too. And I think that's a far better way to approach this. I think with male healing, and, or, growth, I think often what ends up happening is that women become collateral damage in it, right? A lot of men will have a lot of growth through their relationships with, women, because they don't have that intimacy with other men. They're not being challenged, by other men in their lives. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, yeah, I've been in relationships with great men, but we would be, going through something together, and I would have talked about it to 10 of my girlfriends. I would have felt that support, and challenge, if I say something like, well, are you really, being empathetic towards him? Are you really? And he would just be like, no, I haven't talked about it to anybody. And
Yeah.
so I end up, as the woman in a relationship with him, sort of tending to all of that, and in the end, being bruised and battered, emotionally sometimes, for them to experience that growth that I think they could be experiencing in so many different ways outside of romantic relationships.
So the men who are in that position where they say, Liz, you're making good sense to me. I don't know where to get started. What are some of the things that they should be doing? Because again, I think
Yeah,
it's easy for us to be like, well, how do you not know this by now? But if they don't know it, they don't know it, and we got to meet them where they are. So what should men be doing differently? What are some of the easy stuff? Easy may be the wrong word, but the initial steps that a
yeah.
guy can take to say, look, I don't abuse women. I've never harmed women, but that's clearly not a very high bar. Like you don't get a cookie for not being an abuser. That's a pretty pretty basic bar of
Mhm.
humanity. But how do
Mhm.
I be more, Dr. Ibram Kendi talks about not racist versus anti-racist. You know,
Yeah.
it's not
Mhm.
misogynist versus anti-misogynist. What does anti-misogyny, anti-patriarchy look like? And what
Yeah.
steps should men be taking to play a more active role in combating the violence that men are perpetuating against women?
Yeah, great question. You're asking all the right questions. People
I'm
should do
trying.
what you're doing. Number one,
Okay.
listen to your show, subscribe to your Substack, like, consume and share your content, because, yeah, I think, look at, in 12-step programs, they say, find someone who has what you want. and I think that's the first step for men who are on this journey, or if they don't know where to start, if they're inspired by you, look at what you're doing and do it. He goes running and he spends time with his kids, and he interviews women, right? And listens to women. Just that modeling, I think, is really important. And I saw this thread. What do we call it? I always want to say a tweet because whatever. It's the
Where did you
apocalypse.
tweet me
Nothing
from?
matters anymore.
Yeah.
I saw someone, post like a woman basically say, "Has a man ever apologized to you without you asking for it?"
Wow.
And I just thought, wow, like
What a question.
it happened to me once. And
Wow.
immediately when I saw the tweet, I remembered who did that and how meaningful it was. It was basically sort of in the midst of Me Too, and it was someone I'd worked with, and we'd had, sort of an intimate relationship. And he just said, "Have I ever? I just wanted to make sure I did I ever do anything that made you feel uncomfortable?"
Wow.
And he hadn't. That's the thing too. It wasn't even, but it was so amazing to receive that text. And I think I have spent, yeah, a lot of time trying to get like apologies or explaining why yeah, why my feelings are valid to men. And by the way, I've had to do that with women too. I'm not saying, this is
Yeah.
just a female to male problem, but I do think, Scott Galloway came on our show, on Boy Problems, my podcast recently, and he just admitted, men get more out of relationships than women do, and that's just, and that should change, but that's just sort of the way that things are right now. So yeah, apologize to a woman. I would just be like, think of a woman
Okay.
that you like, and it's, in 12-step programs, it's making amends. It's one of the most powerful things you can do, actually.
Yeah.
And and it'll open you up. It'll open, deepen the relationship you certainly have with this person. I think deepen the relationship you have with yourself. So
Yeah.
much of this work, I really, yes, be there for women, protect women, all that. But very often, what women really need from you is for you to go deep within yourself. Because then, if
Yeah.
you're deep within yourself, you're not hurting women, right? Or you're a bit aware of it, and you're actively, taking responsibility for it and taking accountability for it. And so, when we say go to therapy, like, and therapy is expensive, it's inaccessible in this country, it's very difficult, but there's a lot of different ways that you can get that kind of peer to peer support. There's a lot of free men's group, there's a lot of retreats, and there's a bunch of free 12-step programs you can join,
Yeah.
even if you're not an alcoholic, or you're not, addicted to something. There's codependent groups, there's Al-Anon, there's all kinds of self-help. Um, finding a community of people who are also committed to self-growth is just an
Yeah.
amazing way to do that.
That's brilliant advice, Liz. And I can tell you, knowing men, it's really scary though, because it
Yeah.
requires them to be vulnerable. It requires
Mm,
them to kind of lay bare and be vulnerable, and that can be frightening for a number of reasons, right? Is it going to be accepted? And there's nothing worse than being vulnerable and then being rejected again, or being told that
yeah.
then it just makes you become more insular. And to the men, I would say that's worth it. Like that's part of the process. And in being able to withstand rejection while being vulnerable is part of being a man. It's part of being masculine.
Mm,
If you want to be tough, that's what being tough is, not by being violent or by exerting physical strength, but by having the emotional strength and wherewithal to say, okay, I was rejected after being vulnerable and I'm still standing. That's okay. That's not
yeah.
a bad thing. It actually
Yeah.
strengthens you. And if you want to get to the path of actual strength and actual human interaction in a positive way, that's one important way to do it. Um,
Yeah.
does that make sense?
It really does. And I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think for so many women, I know for me, I internalize, male behavior in my life. And I think we can both be myopic to each other's perspectives because yeah, I didn't grow up as a boy. I don't,
Yeah.
I know the patriarchy theoretically. I know a lot about it, but I don't know what it's like from a feeling state to grow up in that system. And what you just shared helps me understand you and helps me
Yeah.
understand, if you do reject me, to not be like, oh, I just didn't, to understand that that is another permutation of the system, and that's super helpful,
Yeah.
to understand that. And something I've been thinking about lately, I think there's a vulnerability crisis. Like, even if you break down male loneliness and to the real brass tacks of it, people aren't being vulnerable. People are
Yeah.
using ChatGPT as their therapist. Like, I really, I do. If you're doing that, I've done it. Like, no shade, but that's and that's what you get out of peer support and 12-step programs, is like you have to share things. Like,
Yeah.
you can't just figure things out on your own, right? That actually, growth and connection and intimacy and even self-intimacy comes from being vulnerable with others. And so if you're
Right.
outsourcing that to a robot, right? If you're outsourcing that to doom scrolling or porn, or I think that's really sort of at the crux of this, and that's a genderless problem.
Yeah.
We're all doing it, but so yeah, I think what you've said is so important for men to hear.
There's a great quote by Mark Twain that I'm probably paraphrasing, but the gist of it is that joy requires company, but misery can take care of itself. And
Mm,
and really, like that joy that you want to experience with somebody, it comes through vulnerability. Like that's why you experience joy with somebody, right? It's not
yeah.
to a random stranger and saying, "Hey, I got a promotion." It's somebody that you've toiled with and been vulnerable to, and they appreciate the struggle, so that when you tell them, "Hey, this good thing happened after the struggle that you saw me go through, that I let myself
Mm,
be vulnerable," then they can appreciate you for it, right? And that's kind of
yeah.
where I think, as a guy, I got to do a better job of communicating to other men about it. If you guys are just tuning in, we're speaking with the brilliant Liz Plank, and we're down to our last 10 minutes, and we haven't gotten to the Epstein file. So I did want to talk about that for a minute, because it dovetails really nicely with what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen a few folks already point this out, that we wouldn't actually need to have the Epstein files released if we just believed women and girls here in this case in the
Hmm.
first place. And the fact that we're refusing to believe the testimony of so many women and girls, and need to see this list that we are pretty sure exists, because this man is working overtime to prevent its release and engaging in the
Yeah.
most grotesque racism and bigotry to prevent its release and distractions. He released the Dr. King files, contrary to
Oh
the
my
family
God.
wish.
I'm
Um,
dead.
Put out a video of Obama being arrested in the White House, called on the Washington Commanders to change their football team name back to the racist a name that was before. But your thoughts on this? Not really a specific question, but it's kind of open-ended on this system that doesn't believe women and requires 18,000 degrees of proof before we take any kind of action.
Yeah, and even once it's released, right? We've sort of talked about this before together. The Diddy trial,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, that was released, and two very brave women went to court and went through the process of that, and look at the results, and again, this isn't to say that it was for nothing, but yeah, but it's. I mean, I'm glad that people are focusing on it. I'm glad that so many men seem to be focusing on it. It
yeah,
has united, not just sort of the manosphere, but the left and the right for a moment, along
yeah,
with the Coldplay concert, as we've talked
yes,
about before. There's a lot of unity right now, which
yeah,
does feel nice. It feels nice for people to be very concerned, about pedophilia and about sexual assault. But yeah, at the same time, it is also heartbreaking because
yeah,
and there's been more attention, I think, to some of the testimonies. I know I've been certainly seeing it in my feed. I don't know if it's making it to the feed of people, on the right, or people in the middle, but I think there's been, I don't know. And I saw Megyn Kelly being asked, I think it was on NPR, what do you think about the fact that Donald Trump, has been accused countlessly of, outside of even Epstein, just like an entire baseball team of women have said that
Yeah.
he has, done some form of sexual misconduct. And, Eugene Carroll to, liable. I'm afraid I'm going to say it the wrong way. And I'm going to get sued, but I think liable for rape or liable for sexual assault.
The
If the
court,
FBI is listening or
the
whatever,
judge,
don't.
yeah, the judge in the court said that from the court definition, it is rape. So this is what
Rape.
the judge
Yeah.
said. So anyone who's Trump's lawyer listening to me, I'm quoting the judge. So go sue the judge if you want. Don't sue me or Liz.
Yeah. Yeah.
Quoting the
There we
judge. But
go.
yeah, to your point, please continue. But yeah, the
Um,
judge has said he's
but
liable for rape. Yeah.
but yeah, and Megyn Kelly kind of it was actually really interesting. I think it's interesting to really watch what the rationale is, because I think from our end we're just like hands up in the air, shrug emoji, like what, how can you possibly
Yeah.
support this person?
Yeah.
And if you remember, Megyn Kelly was the one that at the first debate in 2016 asked him
Right.
about, how he spoke about women, let alone
Yeah.
all these allegations coming out afterwards. But
Yeah.
she just went, I don't care. She said, I don't believe Eugene Carroll. So I think for certain people, it can be selective of saying like, well, if he didn't rape her, because I'm just not going to believe her. And then all the other ones, oh, he was handsy in an airplane. I don't know. I wasn't there. And even if he was handsy in the 80s, I'm more worried about the border. I'm more worried about boys and my girls basketball team,
Which is
which is,
ironic. Like,
yeah,
which that part always blows my mind. It's like because you're apparently afraid of sexual assault that doesn't exist,
yeah,
while
doesn't exist.
ignoring the sexual assault actually exists, and like it's just
Literally.
mind-boggling, contradiction in terms.
Yeah, it
Uh,
is. And I've said this before, but 3 days before the 2016 election, I went to Pennsylvania to one of Trump's last rallies, and it was there were very, very big contingency of like women for Trump.
yeah,
And at the time, there was this stat: 7 out of 10 women have an unfavorable view of Donald Trump. It was just, I don't know if you remember the story in the media, was like he'll never get elected because women
yeah,
don't like him.
oh yeah, I recall
And
too. Well, yeah,
yeah, turned out great. And so turns out white women like him. That's
yes,
what we found out. But there's a one interview that I did with a woman. I went up to her and I was like, 7 out of 10 women have an unfavorable view of Donald Trump. What would you tell those women? And she said, I think 7 out of 10 women have an unfavorable view of a lot of men.
wow,
So, right. And that like blew my mind. And in that moment, and watching Megyn Kelly's interview, because our standard is so low for men, right? In
yeah,
2015, 2016, and now in
yeah,
2025, we go, okay, he sexually assaulted a woman on an airplane, whatever. Right? It's just what? Um, that's where we're at. And that's
yeah,
what happened, I think, with the I put out a video that with the Epstein and Trump thing, I was like, it's so crazy, but if only we had like a tape, that showed that Donald Trump likes to sexually assault women. Like if only that was like on tape, like that would, then we'd know, like we
yeah.
have all the evidence. It's
I
just
know. What
so
more do you want?
obvious at
Yeah,
this point. It's
yeah,
on the nose, just like everything he does. Again, if this was a TV show, they take out some of this. It'd be the head writer would be like, all right, this is,
ridiculous. Yeah,
we got to make this a little bit more subtle. So yeah, I think there's such a low expectation of men. I think that comes back to the loneliness crisis, and some of what Barack Obama actually talked about. He said, we always talk about what's wrong with men. We have to talk about what's right with men. Yeah, I think we have to have a higher opinion and a higher expectation of what men should be, and can be and are. Right, there are so many men who are incredible, and let's talk about them. And let's not lower our expectations to this level of, yeah. And
yeah,
with the Epstein files, and I just saw this as a headline, so I can't, maybe you know more about it, but I think Mike Johnson is like willing to shut down the House over the Epstein files. Did you see that? They're just
yeah.
bro
They're
code,
It's wild. And I mean, this is a guy who said he wants to see it released, but obviously Trump told him no, so he's not going to
Yeah.
follow through. To build on your point earlier about the low bar, I think this is where I get really frustrated with the left. I mean, there's some evidence, I don't know how much, that Bill Clinton might be in the files, but you've got him speaking, and obviously we know his history of womenizing, and you
Yeah.
got him speaking at the DNC and going out and campaigning and whatnot. You got Andrew Cuomo 13, credible accusation of sexual assault, the research done by Letitia James. I mean, that report is devastating. And, he's running for mayor of New York City and no issues. And, Donald
Donors.
Trump,
Yep.
and yeah, he's Italian apparently. That makes it okay. I mean, it's wild to me that these same folks are now trying to point the finger. And this is the argument that folks on the right make, that how are you going to point the finger at Trump when that somebody even said to me that I bet you wouldn't want the Epstein files released if Clinton was on them. I'm like, by all means, I'm
Do
not in
it.
a cult. Like,
Do it.
let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's burn this
Get
whole
them
thing
all.
down. Of
Yeah.
every When I say burn it down, I mean the men
Burn
who
it.
are abusing women. Like, let's burn that structure down. We don't need it. We don't want it. Let's get rid of it. And so
100%.
you're right. The bar is low. And that's what's infuriating to me, that the bar is so low and we continue to ignore that. Liz, we're out of time, but this was awesome. Talk to our audience about how they can find you and support your work. And I've made this plug every time we've had an interview, but
You're so sweet.
you all need to subscribe to Airplane Mode with Liz Plank on Substack for all the
Thank
reasons.
you.
Please, I see the final minute to you to share your background and the work that folks can support you with.
Thank you so much. You're the best. Yes, my Substack is called Airplane Mode. You can find it. I launched a new podcast called Boy Problems. You can subscribe to it wherever you get your podcasts. It's free. I wrote a book called For the Love of Men, which you can purchase wherever you get your books. Highly recommend to get it at your local bookstore. And yeah, just follow me, follow along, Feminist Fabulous, and Liz Plank on every social media platform. I'm out there and I would love to chat. So come find me.
This is the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM. That is the amazing Liz Plank. Make sure you subscribe on Substack and on YouTube. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. For listening to this on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I got to tell you, it goes a long, long way. So definitely support our work. So last week I turned 43. And actually, before I even get into that, a reminder also to support Liz Plank, subscribe to her on Airplane Mode with Liz Plank because she's awesome and all the things. And just she's amazing. So I turned 43 this last week. And, a little bit more gray in my beard, a little more sorrow in my soul. This is my first birthday without my father. Um, he used to send me an email on every birthday, and I didn't get an email from him this year for obvious reasons. Um, my wife Aisha stepped up and sent this amazing email that just moved me to tears. She's phenomenal. I'm really, really fortunate. Um, but something about missing her dad. It reminds me of that quote in Interstellar, which, if you know me, that's my favorite movie. There's a quote that Coop, the character played by Matthew McConaughey, says about parenthood that just I constantly think about. And the quote is um, about uh, parents and children, where he says that we're just here to be memories for our kids. Once you're a parent, you're the ghost of your children's future. And as I think about my dad, and I think about all the memories I have with him, I mean, he's a ghost now. And I still feel like I can just reach out and embrace him and touch him. And we had a really special relationship where, we would, call each other any time of the day or night, talk about random stuff or nothing at all. We would make fun of each other. I was one of the few people that could make fun of him and get away with it. He was very serious to most people, but with me, he, had complete vulnerability and no guard up against me. And people would be like, "How are you able to tease your dad like that and get away with it?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I love it though, because it was always, good-hearted teasing. It wasn't obviously anything malicious, but I think about him often. I thought about him yesterday. And, I think about everybody listening to the show and supporting me on Sirius and on Substack. And just want to thank you all. Your support of my advocacy for human rights, for justice, it means the world to me. I'm an immigrant. I grew up in Section 8 housing on food stamps. I'm someone who's constantly told to shut up and leave. And so it's important to me to express to each of you just how much and how deeply I value each of you. Your trust, your partnership, your support, it goes such a long way. And I am just so grateful for that. And it makes me often reflect on the journey I've experienced, the path that yet lies ahead, and the insurmountable work that remains. It is insurmountable. And as I contemplate how to best move forward to meet and overcome these crucibles that we face, I often start by asking myself, what would I tell myself from 20 years ago? If I could go back and talk to my 23-year-old self, what would I tell him? And and how does that advice apply to now for the next 20 years? Because hopefully I'd live to be 63 at least, and maybe even older than that. What would I tell myself at 43 that I've learned by 63? And so I came up with 11 life lessons that I think about. And these change every couple of years, but I lean into them because it makes sense to me. And I want to present some of them to you. The always do and the never do things that I would tell my younger self. And I hope you find value in them. Number one, always remember to cut yourself slack and lift yourself up. People will try to tear you down. Don't join them. Don't think less of yourself. Be your own biggest champion because sometimes you're all you're going to have. But the good news is that you are enough. And always remember that. Two, always cherish the moment. The destination is going to come or it's not going to come. But that moment is here and now, and it's what you're going to miss the most. Whether it's a movie night, a laugh in class, a snowball fight, just cherish that moment and live in the moment. Don't worry about the past, don't worry about the future. Just cherish that moment because it's gone. In a fleeting instant, it's gone. Three, always say yes when a friend calls you for lunch or coffee. Always. The older you get, the more you're going to realize that that no you gave was the last time you ever spoke. And if you want to maintain those relationships, always say yes. And then if you have the means, always pay for lunch. Don't make a big deal out of it. People remember when you do something kind that you don't have to do. And so do your best within your means to pay for lunch. And then never, my first never of this list, never remind someone you did them a favor. No matter how small, no matter how large, do the favor because it was right to do, not because you expected some kind of reward. There's nothing worse than someone doing you a favor and then reminding you constantly that they did you a favor. To me, it's like that taunt, that injury is worse than not having the favor done at all. So don't ever be that person. Do the favor because it needs to be done, but then don't ever remind them of it. Forget about it. Another always protect the privacy and dignity of your life partner. Find someone who compliments you and compliments you, someone you can be vulnerable to, as we just talked about with Liz a minute ago, and protect that privacy because it can go a long way. And especially when you're angry, protect that privacy. It's that much more sacred. Another always treat the children and the little people in your life with impeccable respect, especially when they screw up. Because how you treat them is how they're going to normalize treating others. If they feel respected, even when they're wrong or when they do something wrong, they'll respect others and they'll extend more grace to others and they'll command respect of others as well. Because if they realize that they should still be respected, even when they mess up, then they will make sure others will respect them when they make mistakes in the future. Number eight, a never. Never let your anger decide your decision making. Speak and act soberly. There's an old adage that whenever you speak, speak sweetly. So if you have to eat your words, you have a tasty treat. When we make decisions out of anger, they can feel righteous and they can feel good at the time. But I can speak from my own experience. Rarely have I ever looked back at a decision I made when I was angry and said that was the right decision. Take the time to speak and act soberly. Number nine, always act to change injustice with your actions. And if you can't, then speak out against the injustice with your words. And if you can't, then steel yourself against the impact of the injustice. Don't let it influence you and get to a point where you can speak out against it and you can act out against it. That's what we're called to do. Number 10, always write down when you lend money to a friend or a loved one. I'm not talking about favors. I'm talking about actual lending money to a friend or a loved one, even to your closest family. I don't care if they're a sibling, a parent, a child. If it's a loan, then write it down. And then write it with the intent in your mind that if they can't pay you because something really bad happens, that you're going to forget about it. Cherish people more than money, but don't let the money ruin the relationship ever. There's nothing to win by that. Um, this goes a long way because we often think, well, it's a close friend. I don't need to write it down. Those are the ones that you especially need to write it down. The closer they are as a friend, the more you want to write it down because you don't want it to ruin the relationship. And then last but not least, always remember the difference between disappointment and regret. You can be disappointed you didn't achieve some goal despite your best efforts, but regret comes from not giving your best efforts. Live a life of conviction committed to justice, compassion, and love, and you'll truly live a life of no regrets. But remember, there's a big difference. If you're disappointed, it's because you cared. If you're regretful, it's because you didn't care. That's really what it fundamentally comes down to. Your disappointment comes from trying your best and not achieving. And guess what? You can try again. Your regret comes from letting an opportunity slip away because you just didn't care. Don't let your life be one of regret, be one of conviction. Um, all right, my friends, I'm going to close there. Shout out to my wife, Aisha, for being an amazing support. You guys have no idea how much of a failure I would have been without her. And you know, she's kind of my saving grace here. So credit goes to her. If you appreciate anything I've done, credit goes to her. My one birthday ask is if there's a charitable organization of your choice, preferably local or preferably Gaza, donate whatever is in your capacity. Even $1 goes a long way. Contribute whatever is in your budget. My friends, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Qasim Rashid Show. I appreciate you all. Much love to you. Peace.